Hello and welcome. Today we have with us Gurcharan Das. Gurcharan is an author and public intellectual. He's also the best-selling author of India Unbound and India Grows at Night. He has recently written two books, The Dilemma of an Indian Liberal and his memoir, Another Sort of Freedom. Gurcharan, what is your big idea for us today?
Well, the big idea is how to create jobs. And I'm going to build my talk on the basis of a success story. The question is, can we replicate this success story in all the labor-intensive sectors? India may be the world's fastest growing economy, but it is not creating enough jobs. This is mainly due to the failure to create an industrial revolution. But in the last few years, a success story has emerged which busts a lot of bogus myths in the minds of our politicians and our policymakers. And it offers many lessons. And therefore, it's a call to action. Can we replicate this story in all the labor-intensive sectors? That's the question. Since 1991, India has grown handsomely, almost 6% a year over 30 years. Now this is impressive for a democracy. It has lifted 450 million people out of poverty while expanding the middle class from 10% to 30% of the population. India has done exceptionally well in services to become the world's back office. But alas, manufacturing has failed. Manufacturing is less than 15% of GDP. It employs only 11% of the people, and the exports of manufacturers' goods are only 2%. No country ever has risen from poverty without this revolution. The successful nations of East Asia, Japan, Korea, Taiwan, all followed the same mantra of exporting labor-intensive manufacturers. China is the latest example. So India's problem is not unemployment, but underemployment. Thus, our data, the periodic labor surveys, they do not reflect the true extent of the jobs crisis. Too many young people in our country, they are employed in low productivity, informal jobs, either on the farm or in the bazaar. But that's not what they want. They aspire to better jobs. They aspire to more productive work. And during the recent Lok Sabha elections, the elections, surveys pointed to an anxiety over jobs. And this may also explain partially the surprising results of the election. There is good news, however. A global leader has chosen India to make a manufacturing hub for global exports. And the early successes of this example offers a path to the future. Apple's iPhone was made entirely in China until 2021. Today, India is exporting $10 billion worth of iPhones a year, and it has created 150,000 direct jobs. 70% of these jobs are held by women. Plus, it has created an estimated 450,000 indirect jobs. That's 6 lakh jobs. And this is still only from 14% of iPhone's global production. And this number is expected to rise between 26 to 30% by 2026, according to JP Morgan. Meanwhile, vast dormitories are coming up near the contract factories of iPhone in Tamil Nadu to provide a safe environment for women workers. To become a viable exporting hub, India still needs to attract iPhone's component manufacturers, the makers of iPhone. They represent actually 85% of the value add on the iPhone. They are all Chinese. They will add far more jobs, impart more skills, and transfer more technology to India. And only in this way will our MSMEs get linked to the global supply, global value chains. And this is how Maruti did it many, many years ago. A side benefit from all this will be that if we can allow the Chinese component manufacturers to come, India's trade deficit with China will also come down. Thus, it's in our national interest to allow the Chinese ancillaries to come in. Otherwise, every iPhone sold in India will create a job in China, not in India. There are many lessons to learn from this story. First, let us shed the false myths that India is a big market. It has a big population, but the purchasing power of this population is modest. The common belief that global brands are queuing up to make in India is a false idea in the minds of our bureaucrats. Apple's sales in India were only 0.5% of global sales when it decided to make in India. And luckily, iPhone's entry was facilitated by sensitive government negotiators who listened with refreshing openness and humility to the needs of the company. A second lesson from this story, the second lesson from this story is that no country can create enough jobs with its domestic market. China, with a far bigger market, needed exports to succeed. So, import substitution with protection via high tariffs, which had been drilled in Indian minds since 1960s, was always a bad idea. And it still persists today like a disease in many minds, Indian minds, making India the tariff champion of the world. Unless we reduce our tariffs in India to competitive levels in the world, India can never hope to create the jobs we want to create. It can never hope to join the global value chains, which represent 70% of the $24 trillion world trade in manufactured goods. Every PLI scheme should thus have a sunset clause on high tariffs. The third lesson is that the prime mover in creating jobs is not the small MSME company that we glorify, but it's the big company to which the smaller company becomes a supplier. Yes, small companies in the aggregate do create far more jobs, and the government is doing the right thing in ensuring credit to them. However, we must remember that action begins at the top. The government must target the global brand leader to come and make in China so that the small companies can supply to the big companies. The fourth lesson is that the big company doesn't have to be Indian. We should not fall into the trap of creating national champions. To succeed in the global market needs a superior product. Since Indian companies have risen behind tariff walls, they have not learned to spend on R&D to create superior products. Hence, the absence of Indian global brands. Yes, the Indian brands will become global, but they will be carried on the backs of the big multinationals today. They will become contract manufacturers, they'll become component manufacturers, and we have seen this success story. Tata is an example. In the iPhone case, Tata has become a supplier, a component supplier and an assembler for the iPhone. Fifth lesson. The fifth lesson is that India needs a skilled population. But let's not place the cart before the horse. Most women in the iPhone factories needed only 4 to 6 weeks of training. And for many, this was their first job. The big mistake of our training institutions like the ITIs, skills missions, is the disconnect with industry. We're not connecting the demand for workers with the supply of workers. Hence, apprenticeships, internships, on-the-job training are the right way to go forward. Sixth lesson. The iPhone story shows that there is a right way to use the PLI scheme. India has obvious cost disabilities versus China, Vietnam, and other competitors. So let us not think of the PLI as a subsidy to the industry, but as a way to help neutralize our own quantifiable disadvantages that we have of higher land, labor, energy, transport, and interest costs in India. What the PLI scheme for iPhone shows that if you keep the targets high enough, you will get exports. Because you cannot, by WTO rules, we cannot subsidize exports. But if you put a high enough target, so the company has to export and export massively, then we'll achieve our objectives. That money will only come with big exports. Hence, the iPhone cleverly set very ambitious production targets. The PLI for iPhones set a very ambitious production target, which could only be achieved through massive increase in exports and in jobs. Seventh lesson. We can learn from this iPhone success that it is critically important for there to be an objective, trust-building dialogue between the government and the company based on mutual respect. It took 15 months of patient negotiations by an unusually open-minded team of civil servants and the Apple executives, all of them who left their arrogant egos outside the door when they entered the room to negotiate. The iPhone story has sent a powerful signal to global companies that India is no longer a hostile destination for manufacturing. You can do it here. But it is also now a call of action for India. We should replicate this iPhone success in all the labor-intensive manufacturing sectors, in garments, in shoes, making toys, in food processing, and also electronics. But one big change that the government of India will have to do is in its attitude. It will need the government to be proactive, to go to the companies, or at least get the private sector contract manufacturers to have a dialogue, a three-way dialogue between the global brand leader, the contract manufacturer in India, and the government. You know, the Prime Minister of Vietnam actually showed up at Apple's headquarters in America, in Cupertino, California, to persuade Apple to manufacture its iPads in this country. And they did it, and he did it because they got worried that they had lost the iPhone contract to India. We should be humble and learn from Vietnam's success. No wonder all the Samsung phones are made in Vietnam. Vietnam is way ahead of us. Similarly, China woos its foreign companies. The mayor of the town goes to the airport to receive. I was very happy to read that the minister went to the airport to receive the Foxconn last month, went to receive the CEO of Foxconn because they wanted in Tamil Nadu. Now, Tamil Nadu and Karnataka and Maharashtra and Andhra and Telangana and Gujarat, they understand this, what you have to do. None of the other states care. And if Bihar wants to have manufacturing one day, UP wants to have manufacturing, they'll have to learn to behave in this way. That you're not rulers of the world who are going to sit and wait. We have to understand that we are not only in competition with the East Asian companies like Vietnam and China, and countries like Vietnam, China, Bangladesh, Indonesia. We are also in competition with Mexico, with the states in America like Ohio. They're all bidding for the contract do this. But if in the end India can pull it off, it will also put pressure on India to do the economic reforms that India needs to do for its own sake, to do reforms in land, labor, and the capital markets. And at the end of the day, if we succeed, what could be a bigger prize than to transform a poor country to a middle-class country? And this is how Mr. Modi's Viksit Bharat will, only this way will it be achieved. Thank you.
Thank you.